So we're going to talk about ROADtools today. Anyone already use ROADtools? Anybody using ROADtools here? Couple of people. All right. So it is going to be about ROADtools, about Entra enumeration. So if you're not using ROADtools yet, maybe you'll be convinced after this talk. If you are using ROADtools already, I think there's some cool stuff in here. So the agenda looks like this. So for the people who are not using ROADtools yet, I'll do like a one-on-one, what it is, why it's useful, what it does. Then we're going to talk about this thing called the Azure AD graph. So that's the famous API that I've been using for the past few years. And unfortunately, Microsoft doesn't like that API as much as I do, so they're going to deprecate that, which is a bit of a problem. So we'll talk about that. Then we're going to talk about this guy called Bob. Maybe some of you have taken my Entra class. Then they will know that Bob is a bit... there's more to Bob than it seems, and that's also going to be the case here. So first I'm going to show you like how Bob looks very innocent, but in the end we're going to find out that Bob is global admin in multiple different ways that you can now detect with Recon, or you can analyze that. It's going to be a lot of live demos, so I hope everything is going to work. Otherwise, we're going to need extra time to do some live debugging on stage. I hope not, but it should work. At the end, there's also a bonus demo, and I think we'll have time for that. So let's get into it. So I'm Dirk-jan. I'm from The Hague, so that's where my Dutch accent comes from. I founded my own company, Cybersecurity, a couple years ago. So it's just me doing consulting, training, like research as well. And well, there's not, technically I think it's not my first time at Wildest Hacking Fest, because I was at one of the cloud roundups. I don't know if that was an official conference, because it was on a Discord, because it was COVID and nobody was going anywhere. But it's my first time here in person. Done several other conferences, and usually I do talk about some of my research, some of my tools. I used to do Active Directory stuff. That's where you also know like probably some of these tools from. Then I moved into the cloud. And these days I focus mostly on ROADtools, which is the last tool, and that's what we're going to see today as well. I have some socials, I have a blog if you want to read up on my research things. But today's about ROADtools. So ROADtools also was released in 2020, also during the COVID. And ROADtools has a few tools built in, basically. It grew a lot more than I originally anticipated. But at the core of all of it is this roadlib library, and that's kind of the technical heart of all the tools, because that's where all the authentication flows are placed. And basically, what I wanted to do is to support every possible flow that exists in the Entra world, both the documented ones, the undocumented ones, the hacky ones that you won't find about on the internet. I think I have like full coverage, so if there's a flow that exists and I don't have it, then let me know. I'd be happy to implement it. And roadlib is basically also where all the like the API schemas live, which we'll talk about later. First tool that I released was Recon. So that's what we're going to focus on today as well. So it's really a reconnaissance tool. Basically, the point of Recon is that you can run it from a low privilege user. It's going to enumerate the tenant. It's going to show you all the data in the tenant. And the ROADtools logo you see as well, it contains like a red and a blue color. And I've always wanted to make it a toolkit both for the red side and for the blue side. So it's useful for both. So you can use it if you are doing a red team, you can just gather all the data in the tenant. Or if you're in the blue team side, you want to analyze your tenant, and you're a little bit annoyed like me with what Microsoft shows you in the portal, or how little it shows you, or how hard they make it to figure out what's really going on, then I think you'll like ROADtools. So that was the original tool. Then after that, there's a couple more tools that I added, and the most extensive one is probably roadtx, or road token exchange. With that, you can do all kind of token operations. So if you have a refresh token, if you have an access token, if you have a primary refresh token, whatever authentication material you have, it works with cookies, it works with things you stole from like the memory of the computer. So whatever you get, you should be able to use it with roadtx to do some authentication. So that's basically also the interface to all the authentication methods in roadlib. Everything is open source, so you'll find all the source code on my GitHub. What I'm showing you today is not public yet, so I still need to polish up the code a little bit, because now it's kind of ugly. It does work, but I still need to make it a bit cleaner, then I'll push it, and then you'll also be able to use it. So Recon, it uses this thing called the Azure AD Graph API, which at the time that I wrote it was the API to interact with Entra ID. So this one lives on graph.windows.net. And the nice thing about this was that this was made when Entra was still relatively new. And that there's also quite a few secret versions that you wouldn't find out on the internet, but you could see by looking at the network traffic of the Azure portal, for example, that are meant for internal usage. So the version name is literally called internal, but it's not that internal because we can also use it. And that version actually exposes you a lot more data than what you can get with other APIs. So one of my favorite things, for example, in this API is that with the internal version, I can see all the conditional access policies in the tenant, whereas if I want to do that in the interface, in the Azure portal, the Entra portal, over the Microsoft Graph, I need to have a privileged role, which I don't have if I'm doing a red team, or at least not when I start doing that. So that's a lot of interesting aspects of that internal version. Unfortunately, this one is going to be deprecated soon-ish. And that means that Microsoft wants us to move to the Microsoft Graph API. That's the official API, it's documented. But the downside, or at least from my point of view, is that this is, because it's a production API, it's quite high level, which means that we're not going to see all the internal data that might be interesting for us, that helps us to know how Entra actually works. And it also means that the properties that you'll see on there, they won't always match with the internal properties. So if you look at some Entra audit logs, for example, the properties that you'll see, they'll match with the naming convention of the Azure AD Graph and not with the Microsoft Graph. So it's a bit more high-level API, which for me as a researcher is, of course, a little bit annoying. And as I mentioned, it has restrictions on what it allows me to access. I'm not allowed to access the conditional access policies on there unless I'm a security reader, global reader, whereas with the Azure AD Graph, I can just see them as a normal user, and I see a lot of interesting other stuff. So that's why I still prefer the Azure AD Graph API. But as I said, it's going to be deprecated. In fact, it was deprecated last year in August. Actually, also I had an interesting conversation with a customer a week ago, and he said me oh yeah, but Microsoft says it's fully retired, so you're not using this anymore, right? Because it's retired. I'm that's not how it works. So of course, normally I would look at the calendar and I would see that August 31 was in the past. Just to be sure, I also asked Copilot, is this actually, are we before or after August 31st? Then I asked it, does that mean that Microsoft lies to us? And it had a very nuanced answer. With that, of course, it's hard to deprecate it everything at the same time. There's still a lot of dependencies on that. So it means it does still work. If you have an application that you're writing, then it doesn't work anymore for you. But Microsoft always likes to have rules for thee and rules for them, basically. So they don't play by the rules that we have to. So they can still use it. They will probably still use it internally for many, many years. And that means that some of the Microsoft apps that they publish that also still work with that. So if you use the Azure AD PowerShell module, they also block that actually. So that was the main client that Recon was using. And that they basically started blocking that in October. That's when my build pipeline started failing. So I was aware of that pretty quickly. Basically, they changed that, they're blocking that. But there's still quite a lot of other apps that you can use. So for now, we can keep kind of using it. So it means we still get access to the data that Recon has. But it's not going to live forever. I think it's going to take a year or more for them to block it on all interfaces, but we'll see. So in order to work around this, I had to implement a few fixes. Getting a bit technical here, but in the end, what we need is a token for this API with the correct scope, with the user impersonation scope. Basically, that's kind of a magic wildcard scope, which means you can do whatever the user can on this API. It also has to be from a Microsoft app, because non-Microsoft apps cannot call this secret internal API that Recon uses. And of course, it has to be for the graph.windows.net API. Fortunately for us, there are a lot of apps that actually have this. roadtx actually has a large built-in list of all the Microsoft apps and what kind of permissions they have. You can use that with the find scope command. There's also a UI for that. It's on entrascopes.com, and there you can figure out what kind of Microsoft apps have what kind of permissions. So we can just borrow one of these client applications that Microsoft publishes. I think there's over 100 of them that have the permissions that we need, so we can just pick any of those, and most of them still work. Like the Graph PowerShell module, that's blocked. But that one doesn't work anymore, even though it has the right scopes. But the Azure CLI is for now the replacement. So in the new code that I'm going to push, the Azure CLI will be the default client ID. And we'll actually see that it's going to be a very useful client ID. Of course, this is a temporary thing because this is not going to live forever. So eventually, I will need to migrate Recon to the Microsoft Graph API. Which has a few downsides. First of all, it's higher level, so we will see less data, at least from a normal user point of view. You can see, of course, even more data than what you can see with the Azure AD graph over the Microsoft Graph, but you need to have the right role in the tenant. So if you're on the blue side of things, you don't really have to care about this because you can just sign in as a global reader, you can enumerate all the data, and you can even use the officially supported Microsoft API. But if you're on the red team side, you want to do this as a normal user, and then you're kind of stuck. So we kind of lose the conditional access visibility, and also we make a lot more noise because the Graph API has like API level logging. So that means that it's very easy to see for defenders that you're doing this. It shows up in by default in Defender XDR these days, so you don't even need to have a like separate data forwarding anymore. So there's a lot of visibility on this. What's also annoying is that the Microsoft Graph, it doesn't have like this magic user impersonation scope. So for the graph.windows.net, we can just get a token which can do whatever, or whatever the user can do. For the graph.microsoft.com, that doesn't work. So that means that we need to get a scope that allows us to query the conditional access policies. And if you want to do that, you need to sign into a very specific app. So if you want to enumerate all the data over the Microsoft Graph, you need to do a lot of token operations, you need to sign into different apps, you need to exchange that token, which is kind of annoying, because with Recon you can just sign into any of the 100 and everything works. With the Microsoft Graph, you need to keep switching between them. So that's going to be a bit of an issue. Probably going to like automate that to make it user-friendly, but it's no longer the case that like with one token, you can just enumerate everything. There's already some work on this, so I started this quite a few years ago, and then it was also picked up by Thomas Byrne from Infosec, and he basically made a graph implementation. So there is a sort of working version that uses the Microsoft Graph for enumeration with the working front end. It's not 100% working yet, so that's why I'm still merging that in. It's almost there, so it will probably be released in like a couple of weeks, and then you have the choice whether you want to continue using the legacy API or where you want to move to the Microsoft Graph. Other than that, there's been a few more changes and also a few more contributions from people. So one of the things that was always quite annoying for people who are using this in larger tenants is that the UI kind of slowed down because it tried to load everything. And now I implemented this thing called paging, so it doesn't try to fetch all the data at once, which isn't really rocket science, but it just took me a while to implement. And actually, it's not just me that worked on that. There have been several contributions as well to the project from Kevin and from Richard. And basically, they also worked on that, getting that paging in the front end, getting that paging in the backend API. So the UI I'm going to show you today does actually support that paging. There's also somebody that wrote an entirely new UI in Vue. I'm not sure yet how I feel about maintaining 2 UIs, or 3 if I consider the graph separately, or maybe even 4 if we want to also have the Vue UI for the new Microsoft Graph data model. So I still have to see if I'm going to merge that in, keep that, or just put it in and then not maintain it. But it was a very nice contribution, and I already took some parts of that for the paging, conditional access parsing, and all that stuff. So a lot of great contributions from the open source community. What's also very nice, and that's also one of the things I want to talk about today, is that we also have conditional access policies in the UI on a per user basis, so I can see like what policies a specific user is subject to. Right, enough talking. Let's go into the first demo. So let's see if this works. Go here. All right, so the internet was fast enough to do it live. First, I'm going to get a token. I'm going to start this with my global admin account just to make sure we can query all the data. And basically, this is roadtx. Roadtx is a lot of automation scripts. So right now, it's taking a credential that I have in the key pass, and it's just going to automatically do the authentication. It's even going to do the multi-factor. Takes a couple seconds. And then I get my token. So normally you would do this by hand. I'm signing into the Azure CLI client. So the Azure CLI client is not blocked. It does have the rights to enumerate all that data in Entra. roadtx has aliases for that. So normally the client ID is a GUID, but you can use one of the aliases to basically not have to write that whole GUID. So instead of trying to remember this one, you can just write AZCLI and then it swaps it out in the backend. Same for all the resources. So these are some of the resources we'll be using today. You can also modify the user agent to be more stealthy, that kind of stuff. All right, so then we're going to do road recon. And this is going to gather the data. I think it's fast enough to not move to my offline backup. So it's going to talk to the API, it's going to collect all the objects. And the nice thing is that in Entra, as a normal user, you can see like a lot of things in the tenant. I mean, I am running it as an admin now, but the difference in data is very minimal. It's only afterwards when I talk to the different APIs that the data is going to appear. But whether I run this with an admin or with a regular user, you're going to see almost exactly the same. Only difference is now I can see the MFA methods and the BitLocker keys, which I cannot as a normal user. All right, so then I can. So it did like almost 6,000 requests in 40 seconds, which is not that bad. So I can launch the UI. And this is the old UI, so this is the older stuff. What I actually wanted to show you is the new UI. So this is looks exactly the same. But what this also does is it supports paging, so it will list not all the groups at the same time, but it will actually fetch them in the background. And what this also supports is the conditional access policies. So in order to do that, I will have to run a plugin to kind of calculate the conditional access policies. So, whoops, not that. So I'm going to run that on my test database. So now what it's going to do, it already knows all the conditional access policies, but it has to calculate the scopes because conditional access policies, they contain like GUIDs, who it applies to, who it doesn't apply to. So I'm calculating that. And then when I relaunch the UI, then I should be seeing the conditional access policies on a per user basis. So this is a new one, this tab policies. And this basically shows you per user what policies they're subject to. So one of my annoyances when I'm doing a tenant review is that it's always like, okay, you can see this whole list of policies, but which policies actually apply to this user that I'm interested in? Especially if you're looking at admins, like, okay, what are the rules for that admin to sign in? Is that admin excluded from all of the policies? Is there an MFA policies? So this tab basically shows you a scoped version of the policies with all the policies that applies to this individual user. So if I go here, for example, to my account, to the policies, there's like a policy that blocks device code authentication, policy for blocking legacy protocols. You can see what the signing controls are. And again, this you can actually see as a normal user. So even though I get it as an admin, normal user can also see this. And now you have it scoped on a per user basis. So that's one of the main nice things. But this is still mostly the old data model. So I also wanted to go into the improvements, the other improvements that I have. And what I really wanted to focus on for this specific release is to really answer one question, and that is, okay, if I have one individual user, what can that user actually access? Like what kind of rights does that user have? What can that user do? And it's not always a very easy question to answer because Entra doesn't always have all the data. Like sometimes you get access in other services, in other APIs basically that you have to query. So that's really the focus for this release. We're going to look at that from the perspective of Bob. So a little spoiler, Bob is global admin, but we're not going to see that in the common places, because if I look at Bob in the Entra admin center, then you'll see that Bob has almost no privileges. The only thing that Bob has is a license. Bob does not have any group membership, no roles assigned, nothing basically. So if we look at the assigned roles, no active assignments, no eligible assignments, no groups for Bob. So it's really basic, and you would say that Bob doesn't have any rights whatsoever. Basically, I can click on any of the buttons there in the portal, and it's going to show you like nothing, no rights, no permissions. Bob does have permissions, but it's not that easy to see. In Recon, so if we look at Recon, then also we're not going to see any rights of Bob. So Bob, again, isn't a member of any groups, doesn't have any roles assigned. Bob is not the owner of any objects. If so, there would be a tab here that showed owned objects. It's not there. So on first glance, Bob appears to be completely harmless. I also looked at it in Azure Hound. So just to see whether Azure Hound would pick this up, answer is no. So Bob doesn't have any roles, no member of group. Also tried to find paths for Bob to global admin. No paths were found. So no way to get to global admin from Bob, right? Except that there is a little bit more here. And for this, we need to look at a separate service called Privileged Identity Management. And let's have a look at how that looks. So for this, I need to extend my data, and I'm going to do roadtx. So I'm going to use my token that I had previously, and I'm going to use that to talk to the PIM API, the Privileged Identity Management API, with the refresh token, token 2, and the resource PIM. So I'm going to change that for a different API, and then I'm going to do the gathering from this API. So this is not Entra that we're talking to. This is Privileged Identity Management. Error 500. Okay, that's interesting. Right. Shouldn't take too long. Let's just move to my offline copy because I don't want to wait for all the demo2.db because nobody likes staring at data gathering screens. All right, so this is the database with that new data gathered. And if I reload this, then if I go to Bob, then we now have a new tab which says PIM, Privileged Identity Management. And this basically looks at all the assignments that you have in Privileged Identity Management. And then we see that we have a direct assignment, so we are actually an eligible member of this group. And this is called the GA group, which means that Bob can activate the membership of this group. And if we go to this group, then it turns out that this group is actually global admin. So this group can elevate themselves to global admin. So if we are Bob, we can actually activate our group membership. We don't need approval for that. And after we have activated our group membership, then we can activate our global admin membership, and then we're basically global admin. So this is basically the Privileged Identity Management view. And since it's a tool for both red and blue teams, I actually made a small update last night. So there's this thing, I'm a blue teamer. If you uncheck this, so now it was checked. So if I uncheck this, then it's good that there's no approval, because now I'm a red teamer, so no approval. If you're a blue teamer, then of course no approval is bad. So it changes the color. It's the little things. Thanks, Olaf, for the suggestion. Anyway, so Bob is an eligible member of this group, which means that Bob can just sign in, can go to Privileged Identity Management, hit activate, and then he's a member of this group. Then he can activate the global admin role, and then Bob is global admin, basically. So that's Privileged Identity Management. For those who are not familiar with this, so it's kind of like a separate feature. You need to have a license for this, but then you get this thing called eligible assignments. And most people know this from the Entra roles, because that's like kind of half natively integrated in Entra. But essentially, Privileged Identity Management is a completely separate service. So Entra doesn't know that Bob is an eligible member of this group. This is purely a privileged identity management thing. So you're not going to find that data in Entra. You have to talk to the privileged identity management API to actually see that. So Entra roles eligible was already in there because we can query that from the Entra side, but eligible groups and eligible Azure resource access, that's not there. The activation can have conditions. So in this case, there was no approval required, but you can configure it to require approval. You can require MFA or other controls, and then it basically places constraints on how you can activate that role, but in this case, it wasn't really the case. Now, to enumerate this, you can use the Microsoft Graph API, but we can also use the undocumented API that Microsoft actually uses. So that's the API azrback.mspim.azure.com. And coincidentally, the Azure CLI has the correct scope for this. So the Azure CLI can enumerate all this data. We don't need to switch clients. And you can actually query most of the privileged identity management data from a normal user. So we can see the Entra roles, the eligible assignments that people have. We can see which groups are onboarded in privileged identity management and the settings with that. Unfortunately, for some other parts, we do need to have privileges in the tenants. We need to, so if you want to know what settings there are to activate like global admin rights, you need to have like security reader or global reader. And for Azure access, you need to use an account that already has access to the Azure resources to be able to query that. So it's unfortunate that we cannot see everything with privileged identity management, but if you're doing this from a blue team point of view, you don't have this problem. Global reader, you can see all of this. More of my kind of problem is to integrate this. So all these APIs, they're basically based on a thing called OData. And the model from Recon has always been very like data-driven. So that means that I use this like metadata document from the API specification to kind of build the internal Recon data model. And it converts that into a SQL Alchemy schema. So I'm actually creating like a relational database in the background based on all of this data, and it stores as a SQLite. So that's also why I can very easily switch like between databases, because every time I run the gather command, it's just going to create a flat file database. I can zip that up, share it with my friends, have an offline copy, which means that if I lose access or if the internet goes down now, I can still do all my demos because I have the data offline. Now, when ROADtools started, it was just the Azure AD graph. And now we're kind of extending that model. So actually I'm combining multiple APIs. So now we have the privileged identity management API. We still have the Azure AD graph data schema. I'm also adding Azure support, so listing Azure resource access, that kind of thing. Azure is not an OData API, so that means that for that I had to build a custom schema. But basically, they're all merged together into the ROADtools library, and that means that we have these different schemas in the SQLite database. Also, I have to add some custom like relationship mapping, because unfortunately, not everything, like Microsoft calls it the Microsoft graph, because you can move between objects, but a lot of objects don't have relationships in the Microsoft graph. Like if I look at the conditional access policy, it's just a blob of JSON, and it says, oh yeah, this policy applies to this user by its GUID. That's not very like relational database kind of stuff. So for this, I have to calculate all the relationships manually and see like, okay, this user GUID resolves to this account, and I'm inserting that into the database, and then I can actually query it as if it was like a relationship between those two objects. So in the database, we have our user class, and then we see all the properties, but we also see the relationships. So that's basically the links between the different API schemas as well. So for a user, I can query which policies that they have, which PIM roles they have assigned, which PIM roles they requested, which administrative units they're a member of. So this is actually creating some kind of more of a graph than actually the Microsoft graph. So this makes it quite easy to query this data, at least from a tool point of view. All right, there's more ways actually that Bob can get global admin. So we have some more data together. And for this one, we're gonna talk to a service called Entitlement Management. So I'm gonna use roadtx, refresh token 2, and the resource, I call it identity governance, or IG in this case, which is this ELM IGA.Azure weird thing. So then I do IG getter. And I keep building force on that one table that we were ignoring. All right, so this gets all the data from identity governance. This is actually quite fast. So let's quit this one and then go to so now we gathered more data, and it keeps extending like the existing database. So now if I go back to Bob, where's Bob? Oh, I'm using the wrong, thank you. I was like, this seems like a different tenant to me, which it was. I have too many tenants. There's Bob. All right, so this is Bob. Where's my, did I also gather that in the test.db? It should be in temp and in, oh, sure, I should have gathered it to test.db. Anyway, I'm just gonna do demo 3 because otherwise this is why there's backups. There we go. So if I actually gather it to the correct database, and then it extends the model. And there we see a new tab, which is called access packages. And access packages are basically things that you can request access to. And this access package that Bob has assigned to is called give me GA, which probably means that Bob is going to get global admin via this access package again. Now, most of the time when people use access packages, it's going to require approval. In this case, approval is not required, which is bad because we have the I'm a blue teamer turned on. And this adds us to this group, which is called another GA group. I mean, it's in the name, but let's just figure it out. What kind of rights it has in PIM. And yeah, it's actually global admin. So Bob can just request an access package that puts him in this group, and then again, Bob is basically global admin, and we don't need approval for that. So this is a different way for Bob to get global admin via access packages, which is part of this thing called entitlement management. So this is part of the identity governance in Entra, which is kind of like, again, a separate product. Identity governance contains privileged identity management, so we actually were already talking about identity governance a little bit. This is mostly relevant for larger companies, like if you're a very small company, you probably don't need this, but if you want to automate your joiner, mover, leaver process, access reviews, that kind of stuff, that's where you get this. License-wise, this is a little complicated. So this is the base license. I think I had the documentation open on this. Yes, so this is the license page. Let me scroll down here. So this is not everything here is included in even E5. So you will need a governance license for some of these things. I can keep scrolling for the next 5 minutes probably, because there's a lot of different stuff. But basically, if you have Entra P2, which comes with E5, then you get part of this. If you want all of it, then you need either the separate governance license or the Entra Suite license, which kind of contains the previous things. I didn't make this up. Anyway, you need licenses for this. But what entitlement management, which is the part that we're going to focus on here, allows you to do is define all kind of access packages, and then people can just request access to what they need for their job. You can link that to a lot of different resources, like you can add groups there, you can add applications that people get access to, you can add Entra roles if you have the correct license, you can add SharePoint sites that people then grant access to, even API permissions, so you also have this stuff for applications that they can request access. You also have it for AI agents now, of course. And we can scope these packages to users, groups, guest users, whatever you want. Quite flexible. Unfortunately, to enumerate all of this, we will need to have at least a role here. We need global reader or security reader to see this. You can see which packages you have on the My Access page. And of course, that's not where Recon gets this data. So it's unfortunately a bit limited to kind of doing a review style thing. But we can again use the Azure CLI because the Azure CLI has the correct API permissions. I don't know why the Azure CLI needs to talk to this API, but it has the correct API rights. Entitlement management also introduces some kind of new attack paths, and not a lot of these have been publicly documented yet. So I wanted to kind of like also basically cover that a little bit. Of course, entitlement management itself is like super privileged. It's completely outside of view of Entra, but you can basically use it as a control plane for anything in Entra, like even roles or role assignable groups. So there's got a lot of like different options that you can have. So if you have access to an account that has the correct access package assigned, you can elevate privileges that way, especially if they don't require approval. Now, usually it will require approval. That can be manager approval or approval from a specific subset of users that you need to compromise kind of both accounts. Or you can just social engineer somebody to approve your request because, yes, Bob really needs global admin, trust me. So there are a lot of different options here that you can abuse. Also, there's like API-driven ways to do this. So the graph permission, entitlement management, read-write all basically allows you to modify all of this, which means that this API permission essentially will give you global admin because you can just create an access package that grants you global admin rights or grants you access to a group that's global admin. There's also this role called Identity Governance Administrator, and this actually is a built-in Entra role that allows you to do this. There's several ways to elevate the global admin with this. I think it's going to be a bit license dependent because if you want to add Entra roles to an access package, then you need a license. If you have a role assignable group, then you don't need a license. It's kind of weird. What's also kind of weird is that Microsoft doesn't consider this role as privileged, even though I went from identity governance admin to global admin yesterday. So it's definitely a privileged role. I don't think a lot of companies use this, like probably they just use global admin to configure this, but do be aware that identity governance administrator can get global admin, even though the UI doesn't think it's privileged. Now I did all the data gathering kind of by hand. But all the APIs that we touched so far, actually the Azure CLI was allowed to gather the data. So I also made like a gather all command, and that's just going to talk to every API in turn. So it's first going to do the Entra enumeration, then the identity governance, privilege identity management, Azure enumeration. So then we see all the different attack paths basically, or all the different data with one single refresh token, which is kind of neat. All right. So to wrap this up, we have kind of a few nice road recon features. We now support conditional access policies in the UI on a per user basis. We have support for Azure permissions. I didn't actually show that yet, but that will be the next demo. Support for privileged identity management, support for entitlement management. So a lot more data for the attack path that may have been there, but that weren't obvious like before. It's not on GitHub yet. I hope that I will be able to clean it up like next week or the week after, and then it will be live. Maybe also write a blog about this, but it will be really soon. And I think we have some time for an extra demo, because there's one more thing I wanted to actually show. And that was something that I ran into a few years ago and finally figured out how to do it. And that is the self-service group management. So if you look here on the right-hand side, there's this feature that you can create a group, a security group as a normal user. And if you do that from here, actually if you do it in the portal, then this option is not here, but if you do it in this My Groups page, then it's possible. You can just allow anybody to join this group. So normally you mostly see this for Microsoft 365 groups, but you can also do it for a security group. And then anybody can join this security group, which is interesting. So it's going to lead us to the last demo. And let's see. So there is actually a group here. It's called the Azure group. And you see this Azure group is actually public. And if we look at this Azure group, I think I need to switch to demo 4 for that. It should contain all the data. Yes, so if I go to this Azure group, then we see that in privileged identity management, it has an assignment. So this one has rights in Azure. On this identities resource group, it's eligible but no approval. So that means that it can elevate itself to the managed identity contributor. And since this is a public group, I can actually join this group as Bob or as anybody. So it actually means that anybody is able to join this group. In this identities RG resource group, there is a managed identity. So there's no way yet in the UI to see all the Azure resources. I did gather them for this demo. So I did also enumerate all the Azure subscriptions, all the things in there. I can show you that in the database. Whoa, that got messed up a little bit with the... Let's see if I can... All right, let's see if I can change the scaling a little bit, because now it's kind of unreadable. Is this one? It's great that I cannot see what I'm clicking on. Yes. All right, so it's in a database, so it gathered all the resources. And in this like identities RG group, it's probably a bit small to see. There's this thing called the GA identity. So there's a managed identity called GA identity. That one I can find in Recon. It's on the service principles page. And then I can find this. And this GA identity is actually global admin. So basically the path here is that there's an identity in Azure, and the group that we are in grants us access to that Azure subscription, and there's a managed identity, and that managed identity is global admin. So it means that as Bob, we can kind of do the whole path to global admin. And I think I have enough time to actually demo the whole path, which is going to take a while. But all right, so I'm going to do the authentication as Bob. And I'm going to do the Azure CLI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add myself to the group. I can do that via the UI, but I can also do it via the command line over the API. So now we're authenticated as Bob. And now I'm going to request the token for the My Accounts page, the My Accounts API, which is this like weird GUID. And for some reason, again, the Azure CLI is allowed to talk to the My Accounts API. Don't ask me why the Azure CLI can do all this stuff, but it can. So now we have a token for that. And I can do a post request to this approvals page. And it's going to be in the join group.json. So what I'm going to do is just send a request. This is what you will do in the background if you go to the My Groups and then join group. On that page, you actually need to have a license to do this. If you do it via the API, it also works if you don't have the license, which is also kind of interesting. I think I filled in all the GUIDs correctly. So I'm going to do the post request. I'm basically going to request to join that public group. And it seems that worked, because it's now in here. And then if I go here as Bob, so let's go to my account. Should see me show up in the group. Yeah. So now we've joined the Azure group, which means that now in privileged identity management, we should be able to elevate to have access in Azure. So if I go to task, my roles, Azure resources, you see the eligible assignment to have the managed identity contributor role on the identities resource group. I'm going to activate this. This is also going to take like up into a minute, but it's a little bit slow. Just like real life, yeah. This is probably the good part to tell a funny story, but has Bob gone on therapy yet? So this is actually slightly different, Bob, but yeah, I think Bob needs therapy. But technically, I could do this as any other user because it's a public group, so any user in my tenant now can get global admin. So I hope I lock down my tenant good enough. Maybe I need to remove this after the demo. But yeah, any user is going to be global admin. I don't think you're going to see this configuration that often. I hope not. But basically, I always feel like every weird thing I can think about. So probably somebody has that in prod. So that's why it's useful to look at these things, especially companies that aren't like enormous, that have huge security budget, that might not know about these things, and that might not know about these access packages, approval. And in general, it's like, kind of annoys me how hard it was to see all these paths in the portal, because I clicked in the portal and it was like 0. And actually there were 3 paths, and one even worked for all the users. All right, so we should get access to the managed identity. What we're going to do now, because we have only rights over that managed identity, I cannot spin it like a VM and attach it there. I also don't want to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use another tools from ROADtools, which is called ROADtools. And ROADtools is basically a toolkit that allows you to set up a sort of like a identity provider. And it's very useful if you want to work with federated credentials. So managed identities, normally you need to link them to an Azure resource to use them. But the fun thing with user managed identities is that you can also add federated credentials, and then I can just authenticate from wherever, whenever I want. And I do happen to have an identity provider available. So that's going to be this one. So this is just a very simple like federated identity configuration. This is the OpenID config. I have some like keys that I can use to sign these things. So I'm gonna do that, and the subject is gonna be the GA identity. So with federated credentials, you're basically saying this identity provider can now authenticate as this identity. Normally use this in like build pipelines or stuff, but I set up my own one. Then I can just authenticate from wherever. So right, so this is configured, and then what I can do is I can go to ROADtools. This is where I have my certificate configured, and I'm going to use roadtx again. In this case, I'm going to use the command like federated app auth. So this is going to authenticate to this managed identity, which has this client ID. I'm going to show you that here. So this is the client ID that we're going to authenticate as. We're going to use the certificate to issue a kind of self-signed token. Entra is going to accept that because it can see which keys are authorized for this identity provider. I just need to change the subject, I think. What did I make the subject? GA identity, I think, yeah. There we go. And I think I've talked enough that it should be synced. No. Okay, why it doesn't work? Should I have added a slash? Or do I just need to wait? Either it was the slash or it needed some more time to think about it. All right, so I'm able to authenticate with this. Now I have this token. So I asked for a token for the graph.microsoft.com. If I describe this token, then you will see it is a token for the GA identity. If we look in the widths claim, then one of these is basically the role ID of the global admin. So we are actually global admin with this. So that means we can talk to the Microsoft graph, like I could do roadtx, graph request. So this is just a shorthand to use this token to talk to APIs. It will default to the Microsoft graph, so I can do v1.0/users, just to show you that I can actually list the users in the tenant. And then I see the users. So now we're basically made our way to global admin with 3 different ways, 0 of which were visible in the old road recon, and all 3 of them should be visible in the new road recon, which is, I think, kind of nice and a bit overdue. All right, so thanks to the 10 minutes extra, we still have a little bit of time for questions, if people have questions.
Going back to the PIM example, you showed that you couldn't see that in the Azure portal. Was that for the same user? I'm having a hard, because that's where you would go to verify it, right? I'm just wondering, I just want to double check why it wasn't visible in the portal and then it was later in the enumeration, if that makes sense.
So why you didn't see it in the portal?
Yeah.
So the PIM assignments, so if it's a role assignment, then you'll see it here. So the assigned Entra roles, those will show up here, eligible assignments. But the eligible groups is just not in this UI. So if we go to groups, we only see the active assignments, and there's no way to see the eligible assignments. Same with the Azure role assignments, there are just no eligible assignments in this view. So it's really just the limit of the UI. I mean, if I go to privileged identity management as this user, as Bob, then of course I can see all three of them. So I can see the eligible group membership, and what was the other one? The eligible Azure resource that I activated. So you can see it in privileged identity management, but on the user's profile, there's just no UI to see the eligible group membership.
Awesome. Thank you.
And of course, the access packages are also completely absent in the Azure portal, and the portal that needs you to go to the Entra portal, then identity governance, access packages listed there.
For the public groups thing that you went through, can that be someone from another tenant, or do they have to be within the same tenant?
The public groups, yeah, you have to see that in the tenant. It's actually a little tricky, so it's a good question. Because in this case, do I still have the UI running? Probably not. So the problem is that it's a little weird setup, because just the fact that the group is marked as public is not sufficient. It also has to have like a policy assigned, and that is stores in like a very weird like metadata thing. So if you go here, it says public group yes, but that's not all that's needed. You also need to have in this app metadata a group policy, and I think this says you can join without approval, but then base64 encoded, which is like a weird place to store it. But you do need to be in the tenant to see this. Okay, cool. And also as a guest user, I don't think you can see this. So you would need to have a member user, but then you can see the group is public, the group join policy, and you should also be able to see it from like my groups, and then you can just search on the group and you can try to join it, and then it will say no, you cannot, or something like that, or it will just work.
Okay, cool.
So this is very tricky to find.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.